So in this webinar, we'll be talking about how to buy the property and buy and sell the property in Norway. So our presenter, Mr. Christopher, will be taking this presentation. So yes, maybe you can introduce yourself and then.
Yeah, my name is Christopher. As you can see here, I work for Eiendomsmegleren here in Asker, and been working as a realtor for like 5 years approximately. So, like Alex told you, I'm going to present the buyers and sellers market here in Norway. And if you have any questions during the presentation, we kindly ask you to either write it down in the comment section, so we can have a Q&A after the presentation. So this will be the agenda for today. I'm going to start about the buyer's process and then the seller's process as well. If you have any questions outside of the topics that I have decided to talk about, you can also ask about that after the presentation.
One comment regarding the question and answers actually. So if there is any questions in between, maybe you can type your questions in the chat window.
I told them that
okay,
they can just write it.
Okay,
yeah. Either write it or we can have this live questions and answers here. Yeah. Could you just take the next slide?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So, first of all, I'm going to start about the bank loan. For most of us, the journey of buying property, house, apartment in Norway start with the bank. Very few of us actually have the full equity for our own. So, as you can see here, there are two factors that the bank will, there's two criteria that you need to be fulfilling. The first is when it comes to the value of the apartment or house that you want to buy, you need to have 15% of that in equity by yourself. And addition to that, you can only loan five times your annual income as well. That is the two main factors that the bank will look at. There is of course other factors as well, but if you want to prepare yourself, if you are just wondering, curious, the two above is the main factors that the bank will look at. Also, when it comes to banks in Norway, the majority of them, most of them, will have this loan calculator at their web pages as well. Where you just write down what you want to loan and all that. There's a calculator, which is not 100% accurate all of the time. So I recommend you to contact the bank. And of course, I really want to recommend Sparebank 1 because it is the bank that is owning Eiendomsmegleren. Also, when you start, when you, for example, have an apartment or a house, and you want to, or you sell that and you buy a new one, you can get something that is called a bridge loan, which in Norwegian is mellomfinansiering, which is basically having this loan for like 2 to 3 months during the handover process. It's a little bit more expensive than your usual bank loan, but some of us need it. But I will recommend you to try to match up the handovers on both your apartments when you are buying and selling. But we can get more details on that later on. If you are going to, or when you are going to buy an apartment, you will need a financial certification or finansieringsbevis. And this is always something the realtor, as myself, are going to ask you when we are calling you to regarding the showing. The financial certification is something that you will get when you are first talking to the bank. And if you are owning a house today or an apartment, you need to have a realtor, as myself, to visit your home and give you an appraise, so the bank know the value of your home. But a financial certification is always something that you need to buy. So that is actually the first step of buying. Before even going to the showing, talk to the bank, get the financial certification so you know what you can buy. And when you are placing a bid, I will call your bank and basically double check that you have the equity, that you have the loan, that everything is okay. So the financial certification is crucial. Also, I have written down the phone number to Sparebank 1. I'm a realtor, I sell houses, and I do not work at the bank. So if you have any further questions regarding loan or something regarding the bank, call them, or you can just ask me and then I can put you in touch with them. Also, I've been told that some of you may wondering what the BSU is, and BSU is this savings account that we have here in Norway, which is mainly focused on saving to an apartment or a house. This is a savings account that have higher interest rate, as you can see here, 4.2. This is the BSU that Sparebank 1 has, and this interest rate it can be higher or lower depending what kind of bank you're talking to. But at Sparebank 1, it's 4.2. And the real cool thing about this savings account is that you can get a tax deduction, as you can see, up to 20%. And this savings account, you can save up to 27,500 kroners a year, no more, but of course less. But if you want that 20% tax deduction,
Sorry. I have
no
to-
problem.
No, I'll admit.
You admit it?
Yeah, I'll admit.
Okay. Sorry for that.
You're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want that 20% tax deduction, which is the maximum tax deduction that you can get, you will need to have saved up 27,500. And let's say that you put those 27,500 in your savings account 1st of January. It will be there the whole year. The next year, 1st of January, those 27,500, they are locked into that account. You can no longer take them out and use them. They're locked, basically. But let's say you put those in 1st of January. In October, you want to take out 5,000 because you need it to fix your car, for example. You can do that. But if they are there when New Year's Eve happens, you change year, they get locked in. Maximum for this account is 300,000. When you hit that number, you can no longer save more money in it, basically. And you can only have this account until you are 33. So the day you turn 23 years old, I think you can still have the account, but you can no longer save more money in it, but you can keep it still.
To 33, is it?
Yeah.
33.
Until
But
you hit,
is there any minimum age limit?
there's no minimum age
So we can
limit.
start, for example, if you have 4 in the family, so we
Yeah.
can have 4
So
even for the kids.
what I would recommend is to just start the BSU account as soon as possible. Because you can only save up to 27,500 a year. So to be able to hit 300,000, you need to start, it's a quick math, but you can't put 300,000 in 1 year. So there's a cap every year that you can put in that savings account. And to be able to get the tax deduction, which is 20%, the maximum you can get, I think that is 5,500, because that is 20% of 27,000. So to be able to get the maximum tax deduction, you need to be able to save 27,500 a year. You need to have an annual income of 87,000 as well. Then you will get that tax deduction. And I know that DNB, they have 2 different BSU accounts that you can have, but only one of them will give you that tax deduction. And I mentioned it earlier, but this account can only be used to buy property, so because that is the savings account.
Next slide.
Yeah. So when you are going to find your new home, find an apartment, you need to, I would always recommend you to already before you buy, know what you're looking for. In Norway, we differentiate between two different types of ownership, basically, if you don't look at the land. But as you can see here, selveier or andel. And sameie and borettslag is basically apartments. When you are looking at enebolig, tomannsbolig, rekkehus, firemannsbolig even, those can also be selveier, but when you're looking at the apartment section, you differentiate between sameie and borettslag. You also have this aksjeleilighet and obligasjon, but those are no longer types of apartments that we have. It's basically illegal to make new ones. And the main difference between sameie and borettslag is really the house rules. Some backstory is that after the Second World War, borettslag was introduced because many people needed new housing and not a lot of people had money. So they made this borettslag to make it easier for people to buy. And the same principle goes for that today. So the main difference comes when you are renting, because sameie is easy to rent, is actually the most popular apartment type to rent out. But when it comes to borettslag, it's much harder to be able to rent that out. I think the rules are you have to live there 1 year, rent it out for 3 years maximum. Then you have to move back and live there 1 year. So it's much more tricky. So borettslag is a very nice ownership apartment to get for your first time buy. And when it comes to buying, you have the asking price, and also addition to that you have omkostninger. And omkostninger is a question we realtors often get. What is it really? And very easy explained is that omkostninger is the price to buy. Because when you buy, we have to deal with skjøte, for example, the real document that transfers ownership. That costs a little bit of money, as well as dokumentavgift, which is document fee to the state. That is the price for buying that you have to pay to the state, which is 2.5% of the house value or the buyer's sum. And in borettslag, you don't pay dokumentavgift, or in andel, you don't pay that document fee because, like I said, it's supposed to be a cheaper way to obtain apartment or housing. So you can see here on the left side, I have actually put up some math, an equation that will really show you the difference between a sameie and a borettslag apartment. So you can see here that the asking price is 4 million, and omkostninger for the selveier or sameie is around 102,000, and that is mainly because of the document fee. On the right side here, you can see that the omkostninger for andel is only 1,000. There's 100,000 more you have to pay when you are buying selveier, and that is only because of the document fee to the state. Also, when you are buying an apartment especially, there is most likely a share of joint debt. There is a debt on that apartment. In this example, I've just put in 30,000, but this can be everything between 0 and I have seen 1 million in debt. But 30,000 is very usual, and the purchase amount that you are paying is really the asking price plus omkostninger. You are not going to pay the share debt, but you have to have it to show that you have the possibility to be able to live there, that you have the annual income to pay that debt and everything. But when you're paying for the apartment, you are paying for the asking price and omkostninger. And then borettslag is, I would say, the easier way, the cheaper way to obtain apartments. And like I said, the main differences are the omkostninger, and theoretically, when you are buying borettslag, you are not necessarily buying the apartment, but you are buying the ability to live there. That is the main difference. But that was then. Today, the difference is not that far off. The same principle is today, that you are not theoretically owning the apartment, but you kind of are. They're basically the same. You can take the next slide.
But home costing here is not necessary for the new apartments, new surveyor apartment.
I can talk about that after the presentation. So, when you know what type of apartment that you want to buy, or house, or rekkehus, whatever, I want to show you Finn, because Finn is the biggest marketplace when it comes to real estate in Norway. Every apartment, every house is published on Finn, usually. I would say 99.9% of all of housing in Norway, they are on Finn at some point. And as you can see, the first bullet point, always use Finn. Do not ask a realtor to help you, because all we will do is use Finn as well. There is no practice of having a realtor helping you with the buyer's process in Norway like it is in other countries. We only sell. So use Finn, and as you can see, I took some screenshots of the most important filters that I always use. For example, the first one is area. Where do you want to live? Right here, I would choose Viken, and I open that, and I would choose Asker or Lier or whatever. After that is boligtype, also what kind of apartment, for example, or enebolig, rekkehus, whatever you're looking for. And at the bottom of the second screenshot, you can see eierform, which is basically what I just talked about, andel or selveier. And again, andel is borettslag, and selveier could be sameier, for example. And on the screenshot all the way to the right, or probably left, you can see that there's asking price, total price, and everything. And the total price is what I just talked about. It's the asking price plus omkostninger. And let's say you have talked to the bank, and the maximum that you can buy for is 4 million. Not a single kroner above 4 million. Then I will put 4 million at the total price. Because if you are looking at an apartment that has an asking price for 4 million, you cannot buy that if that goes for 4 million, because it will be 100,000 more because of the document fee, omkostninger. So use the total price. If I had 4 million and only 4 million to use an apartment, I would put in, for example, 4.1 or 4.2, just to have that extra room. Whenever you make a filter as well, you save that filter, and you will get a notification every time an apartment or house are published that matches your filter. You don't have to check every day. Just make a good filter for yourself, spend some time on it, and then you will get notified every time. You can take the next slide. Also, in Norway, we have this forkjøpsrett, or right of preemption, but I will just use the word forkjøpsrett. And this is basically, I'm not a big fan of it because I don't think it's really fair, but it's really, if you are members of, for example, there is a lot of housing associations out there, but the most popular ones in this area is OBOS, which is in Oslo, and now more and more in Asker, NBBO, which is in Drammen, and ABBL, which is in Asker and Bærum. These are housing associations, that if you are members of them, you can get the forkjøpsrett. And what this really is that if I have an apartment and the housing association for my apartment is Obos, for example, when I'm selling that 1 week earlier, before we publish it on Finn, for example, Obos will publish this newsletter to all its members. And as you can see on the screenshot on the far right here, you can see that you have this, you can click on the button, I want to use my forkjøpsrett, and then, for example, when we are in a bidding war, we bid and bid and bid, and I don't have the forkjøpsrett, and my highest bid is 4 million, and the seller says, okay, go for it. I want to accept Christopher's bid for 4 million. For example, if Alagesh here, he has forkjøpsrett, and he has pushed this button, I want to use my forkjøpsrett, I have nothing to say. I will lose that fight 10 out of 10 times. Alagesh can use his forkjøpsrett, he will buy the apartment for 4 million. That is what really forkjøpsrett is. And
Yeah, but how many months or how many weeks actually they have this limit? For example, if Obos member is there, right? So within, for example, today you're giving 4 million, and after that, after 1 week or 2 weeks, what is the limit? That basically.
there is no limit per se. The thing is that the forkjøpsrett, it goes by seniority. So the longer that you have been a member, the stronger your forkjøpsrett is. So for example, if I have forkjøpsrett and I want to use it on this apartment that costs 4 million, I can just say to that realtor, I have forkjøpsrett, I want to use my forkjøpsrett, I've been a member for 2 years. But then again, if Alagesh also has forkjøpsrett, but he has been a member for 3 years, his forkjøpsrett is stronger, and I will lose that fight, and then he will win the apartment. So the longer that you've been a member of these housing associations, the better. Therefore, I will always recommend people to sign in, because it does not cost you a fortune. As you can see here, Obos, it will be 500 kroners today, one-time sum, and one time every year it will be 200 kroners. We're talking about today 700 kroners, and then you will start generating this forkjøpsrett. And especially the day I get kids, for example, I will sign them up because there's no age limit here. So the day they turn 1, for example, I can give them Obos membership. The day they turn 18 years old and they want to buy their first apartment, they will have a forkjøpsrett which is 18 years old strong.
Mm.
And 18 years is a lot. Not everybody has that. So it does not cost a fortune. It's very smart. Not a lot of people know this, actually. But the only thing that you need is to be a member. And you can sign up for their newsletter so that you can look at apartments 1 week earlier than everybody else who regularly use only Finn. And if you use your forkjøpsrett, in addition to the omkostninger, you will have to pay 7,644 kroners. That is basically the fee of using your forkjøpsrett, but only if you actually buy the apartment. If you say, I want to use my forkjøpsrett, but then there is another party who uses a forkjøpsrett, you don't have to pay it. It's only when you actually buy it through the forkjøpsrett. Also, close family can use your forkjøpsrett as well. So for example, I've been a member for Obos for I think it's like 10 years now. Let's say in 10 years I have a kid, which is surprisingly 18 years old already. He can use my forkjøpsrett, which is 20 years strong. But I will always recommend you to sign your kids, your family up for these housing associations, so their kids again can have this forkjøpsrett. So it's very smart. It doesn't cost you a fortune also. Can you take the next slide, please? Thank you. So what is really important when you're looking for a house? Well, before you go to the showing, I will always recommend you to look at the prospectus. Surprisingly, not everybody looks at the prospectus, but do it before you go to the showing. Write down some questions to the realtor, do some questions during the showing. And when I tell people before showings, look at the prospectus and then we can do questions on the showing, people always ask me, okay, is there anything important in the prospectus? Is there something that I need to read about? Yes, that is the condition report. You've probably seen it if you have ever downloaded or read through a prospectus. This tillståndsrapport, usually it looks like this, and it is in every prospectus. And as you can see on the picture in the middle, you have grades on everything in the apartment or house, and as you can see, TG1 or TG0 is basically the best grade that you can get, or TG1 is. TG1 means that there is nothing that needs to be changed, nothing is broken, and yeah, for example, if I change my bathroom interior last year, most likely it will get TG1 today because it's so new. But if I have a kitchen that is 20 years old, most likely I will get TG2. And TG2 is not bad, but the taxman, the person who makes this report, he or she will always comment on the TGs, and they will sometimes write, for example, that my 15-year-old kitchen is not broken, but it's old, so over time you have to expect that there's going to be some leakage or that you need to change something because it's 15 years old, for example. So TG2 doesn't necessarily mean that something is broken or something is bad, but TG2 is a very popular grade to get if you have something that is old or if you do not have the documentation. For example, if I changed my bathroom last year, when it comes to the age of it, it will get TG1. But if I cannot document that the bathroom was changed through some experts, a plumber or anything, I will get TG2 because I cannot document that it was changed by experts. And as you can see, the last TG is TG3, the last grade. It's red, so it doesn't mean that it's something good. And TG3 means that something is broken, something needs to be changed now. For example, I have leakage in my kitchen. 10 out of 10 times that will get TG3. So this is the condition report. And as you can see on the far left or right picture here, you can see an example. I think on the far right, you can see that the TG3 is red, and you have this text that the taxman has written, and on the bottom you can see tilltak, which is basically the recommendation from the taxman what to do to remove the TG3. Also, in this condition report, when there is a TG3, the taxman is actually obligated to write the costs to renew this or to fix it. So as you can see here, this is, I think it's a kitchen, and the cost of fixing this is between 100 and 300,000. So it's not really accurate, but it is the costs that you have to fix this. So this is the condition report. I always recommend to read it, and of course the rest of the prospectus. But if you are only going to read some of it, read this. This is the most important one. Good change. So after you read the prospectus, after you go on to the showing, you have to prepare yourself for the bidding war. And the bidding war or the bidding day, the bids, they will start the first working day after the last advertised viewing. This means if I have a showing on Saturday, the bidding war will start on Monday because we do not work in the weekends, only working days. If I have a viewing on Thursday, the bidding war will be on Friday. And the bids, they have to stand till 12 o'clock on that day. So I have a showing on Thursday. The bids, they will have to stand till Friday to 12 o'clock. And if the bidding war will last longer than 12 o'clock, every bid after 12, they will have to have an acceptance deadline on 30 minutes. There is no law that tells us that the bids after 12 have to stand for 30 minutes, but the law says that every realtor, they have to do the bidding war fair and square and everything should be perfect and everything. So there's an unwritten rule that 30 minutes, it's enough. And the one thing that people don't often think about when bidding is that the bid actually consists of 3 parts. Not only the bid amount, but also the handover date and the forbehold or reservation. Which is, for example, I can place a bid for that apartment. The bid is 4 million, the handover date is 2 months away, and my bid it's only valid if the bed follows the apartment, for example. That is reservation. So, Brad, if you are a seller or a buyer, always know and think about that the bids consist of these 3 parts, not only the amount, the bid amount. And in Norway, it's very often that the seller gives counterbid. And a counterbid is essentially that the buyer gives, or the seller gives the buyer a bid. For example, the asking price is 4 million. And me, as a buyer, I place a bid for 3.8. Since the asking price is 4 million, the seller does not want to accept my bid. So he gives me a counter bid on 3.9. This means the tables has turned. I, as a buyer, has received the bid now. And what is very important to think about is if you are a seller and you give a counter bid on 3.9 or 4 million, whatever, if you give a counter bid on, let's say, 4 million, and there is someone else giving you a bid for 4.1, you cannot accept that. You are restricted to your counter bid. So that is very important to think about. Next slide. Also, I have been told that some of you may want to rent sometime, and when it comes to realtors in Norway, we do not help people, we do not rent out apartments. We have there is one firm basically in Norway that has monopoly when it comes to renting, and it's Utleiemegleren. So Eiendomsmegler 1 or DNB, Krogsven, Norvik, Eie do not rent out apartments, but we know some of it, so. And I've been asked, is it more profitable to buy a second apartment and rent that out? For example, I own an apartment today and I buy a second apartment and I rent that out. Is that more profitable than buying an enebolig with a hybel? And this question is not as easy to answer as you may think, because there is a lot of factors you have to account for. For example, is the second apartment in Oslo Centrum, it will be way more attractive than, let's say, way up north, where there's no students, for example. So there is a lot of factors that you have to encounter. Again, for example, if you have an enebolig and you're renting out a hybel, it will be way easier for you to maintain that hybel or monitor it or anything, since you will be living there as well. So really it's really hard question to answer, but I will say that buying an enebolig will probably be easier because you are selling an apartment. So if the enebolig will cost you 8 million, you sell your apartment which will give you 5 million, you only have to have those 3 million, which is the difference. But if you have a 5 million apartment and you want to buy a 4 million or 5 million apartment, there's way bigger gap. And a really important thing to think about when buying an enebolig with hybel is that, is the hybel approved? I will say that 70% of all the hybels in Norway are not approved. It's very common that it's not approved, and the regulations of it is not that strict, I guess. But let's say you have an enebolig and you're renting out a hybel which is not approved. If your enebolig catches fire, the whole thing burns down, the renters of that hybel unfortunately dies, you are responsible because you were renting out a hybel which was not approved. So when you are renting out the hybel, always make sure it is approved, or ask the commune, what do I need to do to get it approved? Because the results can be so bad, basically. And when you are buying a second apartment for renting, you want to rent your second apartment out, and let's say you own that apartment, you rent it out for 5 years, and you want to sell it after 5 years, you have to consider that you will have to pay a profit taxation, or gevinstbeskatning, which is in Norwegian. And that is because if you are selling an apartment or house in Norway, which is selveie, you have to have lived there for at least 1 year during the last 2 years. If I rent it out 5 years, I have not lived there for 1 year. I have to pay profit taxation. So that is something to think about. And what is this profit taxation? Well, I've written it down here, 22% of the profits. And it's very easy to calculate. If I buy an apartment for 3 million, I sell it for 4, I can take away the sales cost of it, which is 100,000 in my example here. The profit is 900,000. 22% of those I have to pay as this profit taxation. So that is basically the profit taxation. Something to think about if you are going to sell an apartment that you're not really lived in. And over to the seller's process. When it comes to, whenever I visit homes, people that want to sell, I always get the question, what should we do to prepare our home? What is something that we can do to make our home more attractive? And I've written it somewhere here, do not invest in a new bathroom or kitchen. Do not invest in very big upgrades. Because if I buy in a kitchen that cost me, let's say 400,000, I put in that new 400,000 kitchen, and I sell my house 1 week later, I cannot sell my house 400,000 more. The cost of the kitchen, you cannot plus that on the house value. It does not work like that, surprisingly. So I will never recommend you to change the bathroom or change the kitchen, because that is money that you will not get back. On the other side, there is way cheaper, smaller projects or upgrades that you can do to really help your house look more attractive. And that is, I've written that on the left side here. And that is, for example, change the countertop on the kitchen or bathroom. Change the fronts, paint a little bit. These are very cheap or cheaper upgrades and easy upgrades. This is something that you can do yourself. You don't need to hire in someone to do it. And I will say painting is a very common upgrade to do, because buying the paint is cheap. It's also something that you can do yourself. Paint the paint the living room, for example, or bedroom, anything. Also, finish the small jobs. If you, for example, are changing the spots in your ceiling, you have changed 5 out of 10, finish it. It will look way better. If there is a loose list, a loose doorknob, anything, just fix it. It's very cheap, very easy to do, and it is the small things that people will think about when they are on the showing. People tend to try to find reasons not to buy an apartment rather than finding reasons for buying the apartment. So don't give them those reasons not to buy. Fix that loose list and fix that loose door handle. I've also been in situations where we are not able to sell the apartment. We need to do something to make the apartment look more attractive. And upgrades that I have then recommended is, for example, change the doors, change and paint the fronts, and paint the kitchen, for example. The kitchen will be the same, but it will look totally different. And when it comes to painting the walls and painting anything really, use modern and neutral colors. Do not paint it in purple or pink, for example. Purple could work, but not pink. Nobody likes pink kitchen. So use neutral colors. And for those who have a garden, for example, take care of it, put in some flowers or anything just to make it look better. Yeah. Next slide.
Sorry.
And that is the process of preparing your home. But the process of the seller's process is that you contact a realtor, and the realtor, he orders the photographer and the taxman. You as a seller, you have to prepare your home, you clean and you make the house look good before the photographer comes. After that, the realtor will get the condition report, he will get the photos, and he will make the prospectus. Together after that, you decide what date you are going to have the showing. And as we talked about earlier, the showing or the bidding war is the first working day after, and hopefully we sell after that first showing. That is basically the selling process. The usual handover is like 2 to 3 months. Could be more, could be less, but that is the most, it's the most usual, 2 to 3 months. And we often get this question when it comes to settlement missions, where basically we have a couple walking into the office and they tell us that we're going to sell our house, but we have already found the buyer. what can we do to help them finish the rest of the process because they have already found a buyer? Well, we can help you with the settlement, which is basically the money transfer. It's we are a third party. We will be neutral to both parties, so it will be very safe, of course. But I will not recommend people to sell off market. I will always recommend you to try the free market, and that is basically because if you have a buyer, 9 out of 10 times they will be interested in that apartment anyway. If I find a buyer and we talk and he say, I can buy your apartment for 5 million, I'll say, I'm willing to sell, but I will try to publish it on Finn, try the free market. If that person says, if you try the free market, I'm no longer interested, 9 out of 10 times he will be. Do not be afraid of trying the free market. So this person will most likely show up on the showing, talk to the realtor, and most likely buy the apartment as well. So once again, always try the free market. If you have a buyer that you have found privately, talk to the realtor, ask the realtor for tips. Is it a good market for me to publish this apartment now, or should I really go privately? So I will always recommend of trying the free market, but of course always find a realtor and ask them, what should I do next?
Excellent.
Yeah. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you are a seller of an apartment or house and in the bidding war, you are of course on the other side. You are going to receive bids and you are the one who's calling the shots, not the realtor. The realtor will receive the bids and inform you as the seller, okay, we received a bid of 4 million, 4.1, 4.2, what should we do? Because it's you as a seller who is finally going to tell the realtor, okay, accept that bid. You don't have to accept the highest bid, but of course it's more attractive, it's more popular to choose the highest amount, but you don't have to, you can choose whatever you want. And as I talked about earlier, you as a seller can give counter bids, but remember that you are restricted to that bid. If you give a counter bid on 4 million, you receive a bid on 4.1, you cannot accept it because you are restricted to the 4 million bid. And again, as a seller, be aware that the bid consists of 3 parts: bid amount, handover date, and the reservation. Finally, I've been told that Virdi is a website that you can basically search up your apartment or your neighbor's apartment or any apartment that you want or house, and you can see when it was sold, the amount it was sold for, and it will also give you an estimate on what that house is worth today. It is very similar to the value calculation that some realtors have on their websites. You just, I think you write down your post number or something and they will give you this average square meter price in your area. And that calculator is not very accurate. I will not trust it. If that web page tells you that your apartment is worth 5 million, I will always talk to the realtor when it comes to values, because that web page will not encounter or it will not consider it the standard. I mean of the bathroom, kitchen, how new, how old. It will not encounter where in the street your house is, for example. But yeah, these realtors have web pages where you can have this value calculation, and Virdi is also a web page which is more trustable in my opinion. But for example, I am using Eiendomsverdi, which is a professional web page, so I don't think that you can access it. But It is basically like Virdi, where there's a map, basically like Google, that you can Google out apartments and the web page will calculate the value. And even my system, eiendomsverdi, is not always 100% accurate. It will only give me as a realtor an estimate where I should be when it comes to the value. So do not always trust these calculators. It will be more like an indicator on where you are when it comes to the value. But I will always check with a realtor if I'm wondering or considering selling, what can I sell for really? And I think that was the last slide. I think there's one more with me. So if you have an apartment today or a house, I've talked to Alagers when it comes to what can I give you outside of this presentation, and I've written down my number and my mail address for a reason. If you have questions when it comes to buying or selling, or when it comes to your own house, do not hesitate to call me. I don't care where you live. If you don't live here in Oslo where I work, call me anyway. And also, if you have an apartment, enebolig, whatever, if you are not even considering selling it, but if you are just wondering, what is my apartment worth today? I've lived there for 5 years. I have not had an appraise of my house lately. Just call me and then we can make something out. Free of charge, of course. And I just want to give you all thank you for your interest in me and for inviting me. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christopher. I hope everyone, it was a useful information for everyone. So now we have few questions actually.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can address the questions. Q&A
Questions,
sessions,
yes.
Just Alagash,
Yeah.
one comment. So, are we recording this? So if
I'm going to stop it.
yeah, so we have recorded the